Okay, so I have my tray, my ink with my stick, my brayer, newsprint to protect the table. This was my original drawing, so all of my mark making is where the highlights are, and all of the dark shadows I haven't touched, which is nice and smooth, so you want to touch it, make sure there's texture. You want to take, maybe if you were to brush your teeth, the amount of toothpaste you would put on a toothbrush, and put that on the tray. And using your brayer, you're going to push the ink on the tray. Now notice you could go back and forth like this, but when I push and lift, what that's doing is that's forcing the brayer to make full rotations. If I just go back and forth like this, I'm only getting ink in this one area. So the whole point of this activity is not necessarily about spreading the ink out on the tray. It's about making a nice even coat on the brayer all the way around so the ink is a nice thin coat. The one thing you don't want to do is a lot of students will glob it on, and then they have, and I'll show you, they have really thick ink. You don't want that. First of all, it's uneven. You see how it's really thin here and really thick here? You want it to be a nice thin even coat like this. So if you do have too much ink on here, I'm just going to like steamroll all of this ink over to one edge. So the brayer's not even rolling in this situation. So now there's like a really thick pile over there. It's hard to see on the video. And then I'll just run it in a different direction. So again, I'm pushing, so I have like a pile of ink over here and roll it. Now this is pretty thick, and I'll show you on this extra piece of paper I have. If I were just to roll this, you can see it's a nice thick coat, but it's almost too thick. There's almost too much ink. You can see how shiny it is there. But what that did is it cleaned it off for me. It got all that excess ink off. So now I can go back and recoat my brayer, rolling and picking it up, not going back and forth. Now from here, I have my newsprint protecting my table. Here's my, what I'm going to call a matrix for the next activity. And I want to just roll it a nice even coat of ink over that. Now I'm going to grab a little bit more ink, and again I'm just grabbing it from the thin end, not the thick end, and go in the other direction. And notice now I'm rolling the ink off of my matrix, getting ink all around the sides. That's going to guarantee I get ink on all the edges. Pretty cool. Okay. So I'm going in different directions, I'm rolling and picking it up, I'm not just going back and forth, and now I'm ready to print. So I will place my computer paper on top, and when we do this with the Good Matrix, what you can do is you can flip it over if you want and try to center it, but you're going to get ink on your hands and then you're going to want to flip it, so I would say for this it's just a test print. Zoom. So with my burnishing tool, I'm holding my foam plate or matrix under in place. I'm going to press from the middle out, holding it in place so nothing moves, and I'm adding a lot of pressure. What I'm trying to do is transfer the ink from my matrix onto my paper. So now I'm going to peel this very carefully back, and look, you get this mirror image. Ooh la la. Now, the print itself is not that great because notice my black is not a solid black, so that means I probably need a little bit more ink. So that's why you want to grab some more computer paper. When I say more ink, it doesn't necessarily mean super thick. It just means usually the first print you do is a little bit thin because your matrix isn't inked up pretty well. So the couple things I want to point out. Notice my name that I wrote here, Zielinski, is now backwards. And my highlights that I drew are now back to where they were supposed to be. So here is my original, oh, no. Actually, no, here is where my highlights were, right, on the right. Now my highlights are on the left. So I'm creating a mirror image. Let me just pause that. So from past years, this one had too much ink in terms of a print. This one was crooked and messy. You can see the border around there. So you're practicing, so you are going to try to avoid putting your paper on these outside inks. So you might need some extra scrap paper. This one doesn't have enough ink because you can see in the blacks, you can see the paper through it. But this one was actually probably the closest to a really good print. But again, notice I have nice clean borders. It is mirror image.